Today's episode comes to you courtesy of Jay, who's been supporting this channel as a general tier patron. I truly couldn't do this without the support from amazing patrons like Jay, so again, Jay, thank you so much. And for the personalized deck tech, Jay actually chose an Omega level commander, which is a commander that is incredibly powerful and a massive threat. And that Omega level commander is Anhelo the Painter, with a deck focusing on exciting and powerful interactions, spells, and effects. But first up, let's talk about what this commander does. A 1/3 vampire assassin with death touch that costs blue, black, and a red. He has the first instant or sorcery spell you cast each turn has casualty 2. And casualty is a somewhat new mechanic, but basically as you cast the spell you may sacrifice a creature with power 2 or greater. When you do, copy the spell and you may choose new targets for the copy. This is an incredibly powerful effect, essentially being able to double up pretty easily your most impactful spells on every single player's turn. Well, again, at least the first spell that you cast on each player's turn, so on your opponent's turn's an instant, can be a great way to get a ton of additional value and to actually take over the game quite quickly. Now, having to sacrifice a creature with power 2 or greater is still a cost, but that being said, we've got plenty of ways to ensure that we have a ton of creature fodder to do so, and in some circumstances, we actually have ways to sacrifice creatures for value that we actually want to sacrifice, and other benefits that we gain from that as well. So this is a value generating commander that is extremely low to the ground and can help us do some really powerful things. And on top of that, this is a very budget friendly commander, with the commander itself being like 28 cents or so, and in fact every other card in this deck is of course also less than $1, so it's a very budget friendly deck overall. And as we're going through the cards on this episode, I'm going to be taking you through different tactics that show you how this deck works and how we're going to win with it. And of course, if you are interested in this deck, make sure you check out the deck list link in the description below. And now with that said, let's jump into it. First up, of course, there is Wayfarer's Bauble. Pay 2, tap, sacrifice, go get a basic land into play tapped. But on top of this land ramp, we also have some fantastic man rocks that can help us out, as well with Talisman of Creativity, which can tap for a color, so we can tap for either blue or red and deals 1 damage to us. And then of course there's Arcane Signet, which can tap for any of our colors. Moving on, of course, we're running our other signets with Dimir, Izzet, and Rakdos, each of which we can pay 1 and 2 and tap for their guild's colors. Next up, Cold Steel Heart is finally a budget card again, with its printing in Double Masters 2022. It enters the battlefield tapped. When it comes into play, we choose a color, and it can tap to add 1 mana of the chosen color. Less flexible, but still good mana rocks in this deck are Sky Diamond and Fire Diamond, which each enter the battlefield tap. Sky's gonna tap for a blue, and Fire taps for a red. Now, on top of cards that help ramp us, though, we also have ways to reduce the cost of our spells with Goblin Electromancer and Jace's Sanctum, each of which are going to make our instant sorcery spells we cast cost 1 less to cast, and with Jace's Sanctum, when we cast an instant sorcery spell, we scry 1. These can save us a ton of mana throughout the game, and Jace's Sanctum can give us a lot of great card selection. Speaking of which, Sorcerer class has, when it enters battlefield, draw 2 cards, then discard 2 cards. At level 2, it says, creature you control have tap, add blue or red. Spend a spell to cast an instant or sorcery spell, or to gain a class level. And then level 3 says, whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, that spell deals damage to each opponent equal to the number of instants and sorcery spells you've cast this turn. So first up, extra card selection is never a bad thing, but also we're going to have a lot of ways to make a lot of creatures in this deck, so we can tap for a ton of mana to help cast more and more spells. And also to dish out a lot of damage once we get to level 3. But one final piece of ramp that I want to talk about is actually another mana rock with Crowded Crypt, which can tap for a black, and it says, whenever a creature control dies, put a corpse counter on Crowded Crypt. Then by paying 4 black, we can tap and sacrifice it to create a 2/2 black zombie creature token with Decayed for each corpse counter on it. With the amount of creatures that we're going to be sacrificing, this can get a ton of counters on it very quickly, and yeah, once we decide to actually sacrifice it, we can make a massive army that we can then utilize for even more creature fodder. And speaking of creature fodder, though, we're going to be utilizing a ton of fantastic cards to make a lot of creatures, and let's start with Cryptic Pursuit. It says, whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell from your hand, manifest the top card of your library. So again, basically we take that card and we put it face down as a 2/2 creature. And then whenever a face down creature we control dies, exile its instant or sorcery card, you may cast that card until the end of your next turn. So now our spells can actually generate creature fodder for us to sacrifice to be able to cast even more spells. And again, with our commander having casualty 2, of course, the magic number is 2. So yeah, we want our creatures to have at least 2 power that we're creating. So of course, Tolerant Sky Summoner is a fantastic additional token generator. It says, whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, create a 2/2 blue Drake creature token with flying. So this can also help us make an army, of course, that can help get through on a lot of players. But next up, there's a Fi, which says, whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell, scry 1. If its mana value is 5 or greater, create a 4/4 blue and red elemental creature token. If that spell's mana value is 10 or greater, the Fi deals 10 damage to an opponent chosen at random. So this course can help us out in a lot of ways throughout the game. Moving on though, let's talk about Reform, a creature that can really help us out. It's a 0/1 worm, so while we can't sacrifice this right away with that casualty 2, once it does die the first time though, we get a 3/3 blue fish creature token, which of course we can sacrifice, and that fish has. When it dies, we get a 6/6 whale, and then when that dies, we get a 9/9 kraken. So this can essentially be sacrificed multiple times after we actually get rid of the first version of it as a worm, and of course, you know, at the end of the day, we can just have a massive threat with it once we need it. And speaking of massive, well, Kazul can help make us a massive army. It says, whenever a creature opponent controls attacks, if you're the defending player, create a 3/3 red ogre creature token unless that creature's controller pays 3. 3 is a ton to pay, so either our opponents are going to be swinging elsewhere with their creatures, or we're going to be making a lot of ogres. But we can also make a lot of zombies with a card like Curse of Disturbance, which says, enchant player, whenever enchant player is attacked, create a 2/2 black zombie creature token. Each opponent attacking that player does the same. So this can point players in the right direction of who to attack, and of course when they do, or when we attack that player, we get additional value, making even more fodder. And speaking of players attacking other players, how about Rite of a Raging Storm, a fantastic card that says, creatures named Lightning Rager can attack your planeswalkers you control. At the beginning of each player's upkeep, that player puts a 5/1 red elemental creature token named Lightning Rager onto the battlefield. It has trample haste at the beginning of the end step. Sacrifice this creature. So of course our opponents are incentivized to attack each other with these free creatures that we're giving them, and we can utilize our copy to just sacrifice for that casualty too if we need to. But as good as all these cards are, there is one in my opinion that stands above the rest, and that is the Golden Pig of this deck, which is the #1 card out of 99. And the Golden Pig for this deck is Chamber of Manipulation. It's an enchantment aura for 2 blue with Oracle text that reads, enchant land. Enchant land has tap, discard a card, gain control of target creature until end of turn. This is an absolutely gross card in this deck that can provide us an absurd amount of value throughout the game. As you'll see, we've got plenty of ways to generate card advantage with this deck, and of course, you know, by copying spells, we can gain even more card advantage from those spells. And this makes it even easier for us to copy spells by utilizing cards in our hand. Just by discarding a card, we say, okay, what's the most threatening creature on the board that we really don't like? Let's gain control of that one, and yeah, typically it's going to have 2 or more power. And then let's just cast a spell and then sacrifice that creature. So we're not even utilizing our own creature fodder to sacrifice. We're basically utilizing this as a removal spell, a repeatable removal spell that can help double up our spells. So yeah, this card is absolutely, well, gross and incredible in this deck. And of course, it is most definitely worthy of the title of Golden Pig. And we are actually not done with our creature fodder just yet. Because we also are going to be running cards like Ghoulish Procession and Open the Graves. Ghoulish Procession says, whenever 1 or more non-token creatures die, create a 2/2 black zombie creature token with Decayed. This ability triggers only once each turn. So although this only triggers only once each turn, keep in mind it does counter our opponent's creatures, so that can come in huge in helping make us a zombie army that we can sacrifice for our spells. Speaking of which, there's Open the Graves, which says whenever a non-token creature you control dies, create a 2/2 black zombie creature token. So this can essentially help us replace any of our non-token creatures when they die and help us give us even more fodder. Next up, we've got some creatures that can help us out as well with Death Tyrant and Overseer the Damned. Death Tyrant is a 4/6 with Menace, and it has whenever an attacking creature you control or a blocking creature the opponent controls dies, create a 2/2 black zombie creature token. And on top of that, we can pay 5 and black to return it from our graveyard to the battlefield tapped. And then Overseer of the Damned can make us creature tokens in a different way. It's a 5/5 flyer, and when it enters the battlefield, we can destroy a target creature. And then whenever a non-token creature opponent controls dies, create a tap 2/2 black zombie creature token. So getting rid of our opponent's creatures actually gives us even more fodder to help us cast more spells, to hopefully get rid of even more of their creatures. Moving on, Rise of the Dreadmarn is an incredible card in this deck. It says create X 2/2 black zombie berserker creature tokens, where X is the number of non-token creatures that died this turn, and we can foretell this for just a single black mana. So when someone wipes the board, we can make a massive zombie army out of nowhere that again just gives us a lot of fantastic fodder for our commander. Speaking of which, there's Waste Management, which has kicker for 3 and a black, and it says exile up to 2 target cards from a single graveyard. If the spell is kicked, we exile the entire graveyard instead though. Create a 2/2 black rogue creature token for each creature card exiled this way. So yeah, this can be a great spell to actually not only kick, but also to copy with our commander to make us a ton of tokens and to remove some graveyards. And speaking of graveyards, there's Rise from the Tides, another great spell for us to copy. It says create a tap 2/2 black zombie creature token for each instant sorcery card in your graveyard. So yeah, this can take advantage of the massive number of instant sorceries that we have in this deck and make us a ton of zombies, which can be a great army to finish our opponents off, or at the very least, just a ton of fodder for us again. But how are we actually going to get to all these great cards? Well, now let's move on and talk about cards like Tormenting Voice, Throw Possibility, and Electric Revelation. Each of these makes us discard 1 card to draw 2, and Electric Revelation can actually be flashed back for 3 in a red. And keep in mind, our commander can really take advantage of cards like these, because since that is initial cost to discard the card, if we copy it with our commander, we don't have to discard another card. So by copying any of these, it's basically discard 1 card, draw 4. And this can really come in handy with cards like Seize the Spoils and Pirate's Pillage. Seize the Spoils has us discard 1 card to draw 2 and create a treasure token, so again, by doubling that, that's going to be 2 treasure tokens, in addition to drawing 4 cards by discarding 1. And then Pirate's Pillage is even bigger, discard 1 card to draw 2 and create 2 treasure tokens, which again is basically going to be 4 when we copy it while drawing 4 cards. And of course, we've got other cards that essentially the exact same thing. Big Score does the exact same thing instant speed, and so does Unexpected Windfall. Next up though, a brutal card to copy though is Siphon Mind. It makes each other player discard a card, and we draw a card for each card discarded this way. So by copying this can be every other player discards 2 cards, so 6 cards discarded in total, draw 6. But of course, we've got some other great spells like Fact or Fiction, Pull from Tomorrow, and Spell Twine. Fact or Fiction is going to make us really top 5 cards of our library. Opponent separates those cards into 2 piles. We get 1 pile into our hand and the other into our graveyard. And then Pull from Tomorrow is an instant speed X spell that makes us draw X cards and only discard 1 card. Moving on, Spell Twine is an incredible card to copy. It says exile target insert sorcery card from your graveyard and target insert sorcery card from an opponent's graveyard. Copy those cards, cast the copies if able without paying their mana cost, exile Spell Twine. So this can help us cast a ton of massive spells. But of course, we've got ways to get even more value out of our spells. So now let's talk about cards like Errant Street Artist, Double Vision, and Swarm Intelligence. Errant Street Artist is a 0/3 with Flash, Defender, and Haste, and it has pay 1 and blue, tap, copy target spell you control that wasn't cast. You may choose your targets for the copy. So when we copy a spell of that casualty 2, we can then essentially just copy it again for 2 mana. But we can actually freely copy spells with Double Vision. It says whenever you cast your first instant sorcery spell each turn, copy that spell and choose targets for the copy. And then Swarm Intelligence takes us to another level, copying every single one of our instant sorcery spells that we cast. Yeah, with these, things can get really out of hand. Speaking of which, things can also get out of hand with Maestro's Ascendancy, which is an enchantment that says, once during each of your turns, you may cast an instant sorcery spell from your graveyard by sacrificing a creature to pay its other cost. If a spell cast is swayed from your graveyard, exile it instead. Again, we've got a ton of ways to make a ton of fodder, so we can utilize a lot of spells multiple times thanks to this. But now that we've talked about our plans, let's talk about some more ways to throw wrenches into our opponent's plans. First up, we've got Sinister Concierge, a 2/1 human wizard that has, when it dies, you may exile and put 3 time counters on it. If you do, exile up to 1 target creature and put 3 time counters on it. Each card exiled this way that doesn't have suspend gains suspend. So this is a creature that is essentially fantastic sacrifice fodder for us that we can keep getting back, and when it goes away, we can take out an opponent's creature temporarily as well. Next up, Siphon Flesh says, each other player sacrifices a creature, you create a 2/2 black zombie creature token for each creature sacrificed this way. So this can take out quite a few creatures, especially if we double this up and make us even more tokens. Speaking of which, next up there's Necrotic Hex, which is going to make each player sacrifice 6 creatures, and we get 6 tap 2/2 black zombie creature tokens. So this can be a great way to wipe the board, and again, this can be a fantastic one to copy because, well, we're probably just going to get rid of every creature on the board, and we make a ton of tokens. But we also have some more targeted removal with cards like Feed the Swarm, Chaos Warp, and Expel from Maraska. Feed the Swarm is going to destroy target creature and enchantment opponent controls. When we lose life equal that permanent's mana value. Chaos Warp makes a player shuffle target permanent into their library, then they reveal the top card of their library, and if it's a permanent, it goes right onto the battlefield. And then Expel from Maraska can be a very brutal card for us to copy. It says, return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand, but if you have the city's blessing, you may put that permanent on top of its owner's library instead. So by copying this in a way, we can Fate Seal our opponent for 2 turns, giving them the same cards they already had in play on top of their library. And of course, we also have some massive Wrath spells that can be great to copy, well, at least the first 2 with Aether Gale, River's Rebuke, and Angaric's Wake. Aether Gale is going to bounce 6 target non-land permanents back to their owner's hands, so yeah, by copying this, that's 12 non-land permanents, which can be a one-sided board wipe in many ways. And then River's Rebuke is going to bounce all non-land permanents target player controls back to their owner's hand, and of course by copying that's going to be 2 players' boards that are wiped. And then a card that does not need to be copied, how about Angaric's Wake? Just reveal creatures you don't control and all planeswalkers you don't control. Yeah, just a fantastic Wrath overall. Next up, we can also throw a wrench into our opponent's plans with cards like Izzet Charm, Negate, and Saw It Coming. Izzet Charm can be very flexible, can counter target non-creature spells, controller pays 2, deal 2 damage to our creature, or help us draw 2, then discard 2. Negate's just going to straight up counter target non-creature spell, and Saw It Coming can counter any spell, and we can foretell it for just 1 in a blue. Finally, we can actually protect our commander as well with cards like Giant's Amulet and Swiftfoot Boots. Giant's Amulet says, equipped creature gets +0/+1 and has this creature's hexproof as long as it's untapped. And then Swiftfoot Boots is of course going to give our commander hexproof and haste. But now that we've talked about throwing a wrench into our opponent's plans, well, let's talk about ways to finish them off. And of course we can do so with some massive spells like Army of the Damned and Clone Legion. Army of the Damned is going to make us 13 tap 2/2 black zombie creature tokens, and we can flash it back. So yeah, this is a fantastic one for us to copy. And also Clone Legion can be a great one for us to copy as well. For each creature target player controls, create a token that's a copy of that creature. So if one of our opponents has a very impressive army, well now we've got twice as impressive as one as they do. Next up, how about Sakashima's Will, which says choose one if you control a commander who casts a spell, you may choose both. Target opponent chooses a creature they control, you gain control of it. Choose a creature you control, each other creature you control becomes a copy of that creature until end of turn. So yeah, we can gain control of some powerful creatures and make it so our entire army are those creatures, and we can get a ton of value, if not game-ending value out of that. And then Mass Mutiny is basically a mass threaten effect, getting us 1 creature from each player, and yeah, I mean, essentially, if we copy this, that's 2 from each player, so we can get a lot of value out of this. And then Mob Rule says choose 1, gain control of all creatures with power 4 greater until end of turn, untap those creatures to gain haste until end of turn, or we can do the exact same thing, but with creatures with power 3 or less. Regardless, yeah, we've got a lot of powerful spells in this deck and plenty of ways to finish our opponents off. But now that we've talked about every single non-land card in this deck, let's talk about the lands. First up, we've got Command Tower, which can tap for any of our colors, Exotic Orchard, which can do so most of the time, and Path of Ancestry, which can enter the battlefield tapped, and it can tap to add 1 mana of any of our colors, and whenever we cast a creature spell that shares a type with our commander, we scribe 1. Moving on, we've got Crumbling Necropolis, which enters battlefield tapped, it can tap for any of our colors, Ash Barrens, which you can basic land cycle away for a basic, and Mirror Landscape, which can actually ramp us by getting 2 basics of the exact same type and play tapped. And speaking of getting lands, we've got Evolving Wilds, Timberwolf Expanse, both of which we can tap and sacrifice to get a basic land and play tapped, and Maestro's Theater, which enters the battlefield, is going to be sacrificed, and we can go get any of our basics into play tapped, then we shuffle our library and gain 1 life. Next up, we've got the Thriving Lands with Thriving Bluff, Isle, and more, each which enter the battlefield tapped. We choose a color other than their regular color, and they can tap for either of those colors. And then 3 other lands that essentially the exact same thing, but they're also gates with Sea Gate, Black Dragon Gate, and Cliff Gate. Next up, we've got Smoldering Marshes and Sunken Hollow, each of which can tap for 2 of our colors, and they can enter the battlefield untapped if we control 2 or more basic lands. So of course, speaking of which, the rest of the deck is going to be rounded out with basic lands including islands, swamps, and mountains. And now that we've talked about every single card in this deck, let's talk about the price. Like I mentioned before, every single card in this deck, including the commander, is less than $1, so it's a very budget-friendly deck at $29.48 for an estimated cost. And actually, that includes basic lands at 10 cents a piece, so if you already have those basics, there's some extra savings for you there. And speaking of potential extra savings, you might be able to save even more by buying this deck on TCG Player and utilizing heavily played and damaged cards, because of course those cards need a home too. That being said, this estimated cost does not include the cost of shipping, which might vary depending upon where you live. And with that, the show is coming to a close, so it's my turn to hear from you. So in the comments below, let me know what your thoughts on this episode are, and as always, thanks again and have a good one. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. We also have a ton of brand new t-shirt designs in stock, so make sure you check out those as well. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG Player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all of their support.